This is Duke University.
Internationalization is a commitment confirmed through action to integrate international, global, and comparative perspectives throughout the teaching, research, and service missions of higher education. So are we making it completely integral to what we do? And in the second point, it's basically, does that mean that we are managing to get our educational objectives of the 21st century? There may have been a time when this was not an imperative. Today, we know that it is. One of the things that I always like for us to think about when it's not a matter of pushing off and saying we're going to either do local or global. We have to do both. We know that's so intertwined, there's no way to separate the two of those. And that's why it's really important that if students are not being prepared to be in the world in an engaged way, then that we're not doing what we need to do. And the second part is that we know that this has to belong to everybody. So if I were to just say that, that idea of we own international, whoever that we is, probably won't work in this context these days if we want it to be the comprehensive internationalization. And the last point that I would make would be that you often talk about building a climate for comprehensive internationalization, because that piece of how we move an institution forward takes more than our individual activities that we're doing, because we have to build it in a way that everyone sees that as their mission. And I think many of us, when we think of internationalization, or we think of study abroad, or if you're in the International Student Scholar Services, you probably think from bringing in international. So that movement of students has been something that we've traditionally thought of. It has to be all students and all majors, not just the regional studies and those kind of things. And it has to be all faculty and staff. And then the question is, how do we do that? And to me, we want to make sure that, as I mentioned before, that we're not just talking about global, it's that local and global, and some of us like to use the word glocal because it sort of emphasizes that there's nothing global that's not local. And how do we, as international educators, as educators in general, how do we make sure that we translate to the public, not just in our own campus and the allies that we always reach to, but how do we make sure that the person on the street understands the value of an international, globally engaged curriculum that allows people to be able to survive in this world? How do we keep the faculty engaged? How do we find ways to reward them? How do we use their expertise? And I say never put a group of faculty together if it's more than an hour, you don't feed them, and you don't ask for their advice. Those are the things that I always say. Do those three things, and they will come and help us get what we need to have done. We use strategic inclusion, and I'm going to give us a little bit more information of what I mean by strategic inclusion, but that is, how have you set yourself up so that you can see how internationalization can be a part of that core? Those 6 areas that we talked about, do you have it in your, so do you have an articulated commitment? Are you in the strategic plan? Do you have strategies that are there? Do you have structures and policies in place for faculty, staff, and students, for partnerships, curriculum, the leadership?
I loved your challenges and opportunities slide, because no matter, if you're interested in changing things, no matter where you work, and I work in public education here in Durham, those are the challenges and opportunities around change, no matter where you're working and what you're doing. The other thing I learned, we were just talking about this, is that I used to use the phrase enlightened self-interest, and I discovered that most self-interest is not enlightened at all. And if you want change, you have to get out of yourself and into another person's reality. And what are their self-interests, and how are they going to define value added? Because if you can't help them see there's value added, your conversation is going nowhere.
That's a great point to make, and I think that's going to be more and more apparent in everything that we do. How do we get at those core values that people have to be able to discuss anything, to be able to move us forward in so many different areas? And it's interesting that you would say that, because I often feel the same thing, that we'll see these lists, and no matter what your area is, you can see how it fits. It's the framing of it in your context, and that's why I think that context is important.